nothing works, don't bother. Like that's a great way to waste time and money, is to try to compete with the portals.
Hi everybody, I'm Matias and this is Academia Inmobiliaria. Today we are here with no other than Mike DelPrete. Mike is one of the most important PropTech analysts in the US, and we have him here today to get his insights on some of the biggest trends currently happening in LATAM and maybe how they happen and they played out in the US. So Mike, thank you so much for being here today.
Sure, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So Mike, let's start with personal question. You've become the leading voice in real estate and PropTech in the US. What unique perspective do you bring to your analysis that you think has made you that top voice?
I appreciate that. I don't know if I'm the voice, but I definitely love doing what I'm doing. I think, what drives me, I have a little sign in my office that says clarity through context. And that's really a lot of what drives me. I like to get to the bottom, the truth, the root of issues. There's so much noise out there and it's hard to understand what to believe. And there's a difference between opinions and facts. So for whatever reason, I really value transparency and I want to try to collect data. I'm a data guy. Like it's got to be data. Without data, you can't do anything. Get that data to provide folks with this contextual picture of what's happening, what's going on. Cut through the noise, cut through the hype, and focus on the actual facts, and then present it to people in a easy to read, easy to digest, and understand way. And that's the context. And then they can, folks can use that to be able to make better decisions faster. So that's kind of the, I guess, my North Star, kind of the gravitational pull of what I do and why I do it.
And I think that that's amazing. All of us who follow you, read you, listen to your podcast, I think that that's what we see. We see data and then we can choose to do whatever we want with that. But it's taking out all the noise in a very summarized kind of experience. So that's amazing. I have to ask you, because I know that you are very familiar with emerging markets because you lived in New Zealand. So how has your experience in US market and your time in New Zealand, do you think has shaped your understanding of trends potentially happening in other markets?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I'm based here in the US. I lived overseas in New Zealand for a number of years and I worked at a big property portal there. So I had exposure there. And, in between those, I've traveled around the world and I've gone to a bunch of different markets, whether it's, Germany, Poland, Indonesia, Norway, the UK, Canada, Brazil, I was just in. So, I've seen a lot there. And I think that for me, the broad perspective, I guess it kind of distills to two areas. One is there's a lot of commonalities in all of these markets, all of them. Like there's a lot of commonalities, even with differences, but I think there's more in common than there's different. But then the second key insight is that not every market, not every country is on the same path. Meaning, it's not like the US is way far down the path and everybody else is kind of down there, right? Indonesia is not really on the same path as the US. It's not 15 years behind. It's not going to develop the same way. And that was a big insight for me, is that everybody's on a different path. There's a lot of commonalities, there's things to learn, but it's not linear, right? We're not all going in the same direction. It's very easy to open up Excel and look at some numbers for an emerging market like the Philippines. I actually coined this, the Philippines problem, because when you look at just the numbers, the Philippines looks like a great market if it went the exact same way as the US or the UK or Germany. But it's not. It's a totally different country. There's different factors at play and all of that. I think those are kind of the two key learnings, really underpinned with, we can get smarter. The more we know, the smarter we get. When I was in New Zealand at the real estate portal there, I was like, wait a minute, we're talking about making multi-million-dollar investments on something, I'm sure someone else has done this, so let's look around and see and try to learn from that as opposed to, reinventing the wheel every time.
Right, and that's exactly what I want to get out of this conversation. So I like now to bring some of the trends that are happening that we're seeing in LATAM and just hear your thoughts if you've seen something similar happen in the US or elsewhere, and just kind of hear a bit of history on how those played out. So the first one is that in recent years, Latin America has seen a sharp increase in portal pricing leading to few listings because a lot of agents aren't willing to pay for those increases, and pressure on agents to improve lead conversion. Before you were getting massive amount of leads, you weren't really taking care of them because you knew you were getting more in the door, and now agents are really starting to look at those leads. Do you remember a similar trend happening in the US in the past?
Oh yeah, I mean, it happens everywhere. Happens everywhere. And I think, there's a lot that we could unpack there, but that's a reflection of the incredible power that real estate portals have in every market. They're the top of the funnel. A real estate portal is where a consumer goes when they're starting to think about buying or selling a property. And the US has the MLS system. So there's effectively this like free database where all properties are. So that's a bit different, but effectively in almost every other market, there are no MLSs. So the real estate portal is the de facto MLS. It is the de facto database of all properties for sale. That's incredibly valuable. That's where consumers are already going. If you're an agent, how do you tell your homeowner, yeah, I'm not going to list your property for sale on the number one site of the country and the one you're looking at every day because they raised their prices, right? The consumer is going to be like, nope, bye, see ya. So they just have, the portals have this incredible pricing power. It can be very monopolistic. And I mean, it moves in one direction. It just keeps going up, because there's no alternative. And when alternatives try to start, they fail because that leading portal has so much power from the traffic and the eyeballs they get.
Yeah, and so my next question was heading in that direction. Do you remember some of the reactions that the market had, whether it was emerging solutions or agents, pushing back, and did any responses that you can remember not ended up in just agents taking better care of the leads coming through because they were more expensive?
I mean, the response is the same. You have to pay. There's boycotts and alternative portals and a bunch of brokers getting together and starting their own portal. Like nothing works. There's dozens and dozens of examples of that. Nothing works. Don't bother. Like that's a great way to waste time and money, is to try to compete with the portals.
Just take better care of your customers.
But the other thing that comes out of that, Matthias, is I think the quality and the value of a lead is correspondingly going down over time, because there's so many leads from so many websites. So 10 years ago, a lead might be worth $100, but now I'd say it's worth, $15, right? Just to kind of throw some random numbers. In the US, I think every year, we call it 100 million leads are generated, but there's only 5 million transactions. So there's a lot of leads, and the value of a lead is going down. What I'm saying is, I don't know that what you're saying is true, which is, take better care of your leads, because there's just so many of them, and there's so many low quality ones that you're going to get disillusioned really fast if you're doing a really good job there. I don't know what the answer is, but I think you just need, if you're an agent, you need to be really good at doing your job, and you need to be really good at following up with people and figuring out who's, cold, cool, warm, and hot. And managing that process, and not being afraid to, send emails, send marketing campaigns, pick up the phone. Like the fundamentals haven't changed. You just have to be really, really good at that.
I think that's a really good conclusion. So another trend that we're starting to see in LATAM is revenue sharing models, where portals are starting to look into moving away from upfront pricing and more into revenue sharing. Can you walk us through into the evolution of this model in the US, if it worked, who pioneered it, how was the deal struck?
I call that next gen lead gen. If you search for that, I've written articles and stuff about it. You can get into it. I don't know that anyone's necessarily pioneered it, but in the US, you have Zillow and Realtor.com operating like that. Overseas, you have models in Germany, France. I think it's emerged simultaneously in a number of different markets. Like all good ideas, it kind of comes up. And I do think it's a good idea, because what it really does is aligns the incentives of everybody, of all three players: the portals, the agents, and the consumers. Because what it's saying is, you're not going to pay for this lead unless they transact. So everybody's incentivized to do a really great job with each lead. And that's good for the consumers, the leads, right? It's good for them. It's good for the agents because it incentivizes them, and it's good for the portals. It incentivizes them to create high quality leads and deliver those. And again, there's some commonalities there too, Matthias, right? They usually take 30 to 40% of a commission as a fee. But I think more interestingly is those programs, at least in the US, and I would guess, well, everywhere too, Germany, they kind of hit this glass ceiling. They just can't convert all of their leads to that. It doesn't work from a business standpoint. There's a certain amount of leads and they're sending it to a certain amount of teams because not all the agents and teams can operate like this as well. And it's still a minority of the business. So it's a part of the program, but it's a minority. And honestly, if you asked me if the portals made more money from this, I'd say probably not. So it's kind of just a different way to skin the same cat as opposed to a much, much, much better way from a financial standpoint.
Right. And then to your point, there's objective alignment. Now you see the portal being aligned. I'm not just providing you leads, I'm worried about the outcome of those leads. So the relationship probably becomes much better. But do you remember, maybe in some of the markets that you saw, what was the initial reaction of agents? Were they okay with it, or at first they generally don't like it?
Furious. Just absolutely furious.
Somebody's trying to take part of their money. That's how they see it initially.
Yeah, that's one of those commonalities around the world. In every country, every market I've been in, every market out there, real estate agents hate portals, hate them. They're not like, oh, all right, because of the pricing power we talked about earlier. And yeah, if a price rise comes out, agents hate it. For this, you can imagine the backlash. Like, you're going to take my commission? What? Even if you walk through the math, you're like, instead of buying 100 leads for $10 each, or we're going to send you 100 leads, and if only a couple of them convert, it's the same. It doesn't matter. All that agents hear is that the portal, the company they already hate, is coming and taking 30% of their commission. So absolutely furious.
Okay. So bonus question on this topic. Do you remember any one portal around the world that you've seen that built a healthy relationship with agents?
Zillow's built a healthy relationship with their agent partners because they're working with just 1% of the market. And that's why the model in the US is different. But Zillow's got a huge sales organization supporting, a very, very, very small number, like less than 1% of the agents out there, these premier agent teams. And they spend a lot of time with them back and forth. So that relationship is good. And, meanwhile, the other 99% of agents hate them, but it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. No, I can't think of anyone else.
Okay. All right. So finally, the last thing that I want to ask you about is legacy players and the rise of incumbents. In LATAM, legacy players are still maintaining dominance while incumbents are still just emerging. So which tech-driven models or companies in the US have you seen that are most successful in gaining market share from legacy players, and why do you think that was?
Yeah, the quote I'll give you is, we're losing so slowly we think we're winning. That's the risk for the incumbents, because everything that's happening is like slow motion. And as humans, we can't perceive things that are moving too slowly. And this is moving really slow in the US. So it's very easy to look at that and say, oh, everything's fine, but it's not fine. There are clear winners and losers. It's just going in slow motion. It's not so much tech driven, which is disappointing, for people like you and I. We want to think technology is driving
Exactly.
this. It's not so much tech driven. It's mainly business model driven. So to answer your question, I think the best example is eXp Realty in the US. They had a model where they have no physical offices. It's all online. So there's technology. And because of that, their costs are way down. Like, I was just looking at these numbers earlier today. The incumbent is 7 times greater in terms of their costs per transaction. So their cost is way down,
Wow.
which enables them to share more of the commission with their agents. So agents keep a higher percentage of their commission than the incumbent because their costs are lower. And that's attractive to agents. Agents, whether it logically makes sense, back to the portal thing, it doesn't matter. All agents hear is, oh, I can keep more of my commission, I'm going to go over there. And it's just slowly steamrolled. And now eXp is the number one brokerage by transaction count in the US. They've got incredible, this is classic innovator's dilemma. Their operating costs are exponentially lower than the incumbents. The incumbents can't compete. They can't decide tomorrow to close all of their offices. They can't, they're stuck. So I think that's one of the best examples. And then lastly, I'll add on, technology, you can bolt technology onto that business to make the business more efficient. Think in the back end, not consumers and agents, but the back office, the people doing the accounting or transaction management or whatnot. There's smart application of technology there to make that more efficient, which again, it's all about reducing the operating expense as low as possible.
Right, absolutely. And I love what you just said, that it's not about technology changing, but rather business models changing and using technology to enable how you operate differently and more efficiently. So I think that that's a great takeaway. Mike, we've gone over time. To wrap up, I'd love to hear, if you want, if people in LATAM, if you had one piece of advice for portals in LATAM, for incumbents in LATAM, and for PropTechs in LATAM.
I'll give you two bits of advice. One is pay attention to what's happening around the world, right? To my earlier point, there's so much going on. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can stand on the shoulders of giants. You can't copy and paste what's happening in another market to your market and expect it to work, but it's a 50-50 mix. You got to see what else is going on and then apply it to your market. That's where the magic happens. So stay informed what's going on everywhere as much as possible. The second bit of advice is focus on the fundamentals. At the end of the day, portals do what they do, brokers do what they do, agents do what they do. Agents are still the center of the transaction. They are the traffic cop, the quarterback, whatever, the key midfielder, whatever you want, right? They run the whole thing. And no matter what's happening, billions of dollars invested, that's not changing. So focus on the fundamentals. How do we do a great job at customer service and helping people out, rather than, how do I do this new shiny thing that doesn't really move the needle?
Outstanding. All right, Mike, thank you so much. It's been great having you. And I think that you're bringing a lot of perspective into what's happening in LATAM from other markets. So again, thank you for the time.
Sure. Thanks, Matthias. My pleasure.